Kings of the Wyld by Nicholas Eames, a fantasy novel that everybody has been raving about just how good it is. Naturally, this got my curiosity tingling, so I had to read it. But now that the date is gone, the real question is, does this novel live up to all the hype that is surrounding it? Well, that's what we'll talk about today. First, let's start with the story. In Kings of the Wyld, we follow our protagonist Clay Copper. He is a warrior who is part of this mercenary band known as Saga. The exploits or Saga are absolutely incredible. They have killed dragons, rescued princes, and even killed armies worth of monsters. However, due to internal disagreements, Saga disbanded after just a couple of years and every member went their separate ways. Clay, for his part, settled down in a small town with his wife and daughter and had a peaceful life. But everything changes one day when one of Clay's ex-bandmates shows up at his doorstep begging for his help to try and reunite Saga so they can go and try to save his daughter, who is trapped in a city besieged by a horde of monsters. Clay begrudgingly agrees to help, and both of them set out to reunite Saga and then to march up into this adventure that turns out to be more of a suicidal mission than they initially thought of. Story-wise, the plot is very well written. It has a nice pace that at the start we see our heroes as these rusty old adventurers who even struggle to walk from one town to the other without getting mugged. But as the story progresses and as the threats keep getting bigger, we see them fall back into their own and gain more confidence with their skills. There are also some nice twists and turns here and there that, while not numerous, do keep the story from getting stale. However, there were still a few things that did bother me about the story, all of which are focused on one specific part: the epilogue. I will clarify, however, that I did like the ending. It is a nice conclusion not only to the story, but also to the character arcs and the overall theme that we get throughout the novel. My problem is not there. My problem is literally the last chapter that we get before the novel ends. Now, the bulk of my problem with this epilogue is that, and I'm gonna keep it as vague as possible to avoid any spoilers, some of the characters do some things that, in all intents and purposes, should have dire consequences in the future. But all throughout the epilogue, I was waiting to see those consequences, but they never did. Which is disappointing because it kind of cuts down the realism that the whole novel was having. Because these actions were not minor, these were some big things that should affect them, but they never do. And it's a little disappointing to see the realism cut down at the very end of the novel, the last few bits that we will always remember the novel for. So yeah, I think it drops the ball a little bit with the logic right at the end. Now, the other problem that I have with this epilogue is the fate that it gives us to one of the characters. It was one of the situations where I was reading it and I just threw my hands in the air, said like, it feels kind of out of character, and at the same time, this character didn't exactly have a story arc, but it had some different things that kept him interesting, but in the end they just kind of like flop him over with his fate and feel like they did him dirty, and I was honestly disappointed that they flopped him this bad. But moving on to the character department, I gotta say, I mostly have positive things to say in this regard. All of our characters, from Clay to all his bandmates, well, there's only 5 of them, they all have very distinct personalities, abilities, they have needs, wants, but what I found most interesting is that all have this sort of trauma that is really setting them back, and this makes them feel like they're truly vulnerable. And I also love the detail that when we find them, these guys are really rusty. They are not the legends that they used to be. They don't really know how to use their abilities anymore. They do have talent. We see that they still have the spark in them, but boy, they have some training to do or some warming up to do before they can truly be even half of what they used to be. And the supporting characters are solid too. Even the ones that we only see for a few scenes, they have so much charm and personality, but also quirks that make them memorable. So overall, I would say in the character department, I have big positives. All the characters feel human enough so we are empathetic to them, but they have enough things going on that make them stand out from one another. I also wanted to highlight that one of the biggest positives of this novel is that it is through the actions and dialogue of the main characters that we get this sense that they were, and for the most part, are still friends. Yeah, it's easy to see once they get back into the group how they were these legendary mercenaries, but it is only throughout their banter and rapport that we get this feeling that these are guys who haven't seen one another in a long time and they still are friendly to one another, how they complement and form this legendary band of mercenaries. It truly lends this sort of vibe of friends getting back together throughout the whole novel, which is honestly endearing. Another thing that really surprised me about this novel is just how well written it is and just how funny it is. We get a lot of humorous prose and serious humor that had me laughing out loud. Honestly, these jokes don't feel forced or just funny to be funny. They feel like they have a purpose throughout the whole book. Because you see, the world that is presented in Kings of the Wyld is very grim and dark. Not only is it plagued with monsters, there's also sickness, thieves, and there's pretty much 1,000 ways to find a horrible death. But the humorous prose makes all the situation a little lighter, since if you can laugh about a situation, it doesn't feel as serious. But it never truly drains all the threat that is here. It just gives it a good, sort of lighter vibe, and it's kind of what we see throughout the whole novel, which is not exactly taking away the darkness, it's just making it kind of like grayish. And that is the whole vibe this novel exudes. Yes, it is a book that has some incredible action, some good characters and decent story, but at its core, it's a novel about undying friendship and love. I think that reading this novel will make everyone sort of empathize with all the characters, because I think we've all had that old band of friends that we had some great times with, but just with time we grew apart. And maybe it is the time that we have a reunion, just like Saga did in this novel. So taking all things into consideration, I will give Kings of the Wyld 5 stars out of 5. Yes, I think this novel is a masterpiece. The story is great, the characters are great. While the ending is not the most solid one, it certainly is not a deal breaker. I highly recommend this novel to any fan of the fantasy genre, or anybody that just wants to think of his band of friends and kind of get them back together. And that was the review of Kings of the Wyld. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and if you did, please give this video a like and consider subscribing if you want more content about books, manga, and graphic novels. Other than that, my name is Aaron, and I'll be seeing you all